You're watching 535.
This is 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
We're live from the Capitol, and 535 starts right now.
Good morning. It's Wednesday, June 24th, and this is 535 live from the Cannon Rotunda. I'm Susan Davis. And just yesterday, Congress passed a landmark piece of housing legislation. Sean Donovan, the former HUD secretary under President Obama, told the New York Times it was, quote, the most important and most comprehensive housing bill of this century. Nebraska Congressman Mike Flood is a member of the House Financial Services Committee, and he helped get this bill passed. This bill was supposed to be signed into law in just about an hour, but President Trump, just moments ago, announced that he had canceled the signing ceremony that was set up in Statuary Hall in order to get Congress to pass a separate, unrelated piece of legislation. Congressman Flood, thanks for being here.
Thank you. You got some breaking news this morning.
You know, part of the conceit of 535 was we didn't exist to ask members of Congress to constantly react to President Trump's tweets, but in this circumstance, I have to ask you to respond to this. What just happened?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud of this bill.
Yeah.
So I'm the chairman of the subcommittee that wrote it, and this is totally bipartisan. This is about the SAVE Act, according to the
Yes.
per the president.
Which is voting rights legislation.
I have voted for that 3 times, and we have overwhelmingly supported it in the House. This is a Senate issue. I understand the president is having lunch with the senators. I don't even think I want to be a fly on the wall in that lunch because who knows how that's going to go. But this is a conversation he has to have with his colleagues over there. I don't think this is about housing. I think this is about his relationship with the Senate, and maybe more importantly, it's about his real desire to see the SAVE Act passed. But I want to iterate, like, I voted for this 3 times. Yeah. Americans do believe in voter ID. It's a more than a bipartisan issue. We will get the housing bill done. These are the things that happen all the time in Washington, and this is what the process looks like sometimes. It's messy. But I didn't see he said he was going to veto it.
No.
He said he wasn't signing it today. So we have to take that for what it is.
I mean, this legislation also had veto-proof margins. That's how popular it was, and it's clearly not about the underlying bill. Is it even fathomable to you that the president wouldn't sign this into law before the midterm elections?
No. I have to think he's going to sign it. You know, his team put out a statement of presidential position and basically said we endorse the House product that was then later even improved by the Senate, and it was voted with 360 some votes yesterday, 32 no votes. Like, to your point, this has broad support. It moves the ball. It makes housing more affordable. It gets rid of the requirement you have to have a chassis and a mobile home, which means we can go back to the days of 1905 when you could buy a house in the Sears Roebuck catalog, and those homes are still standing today. So this bill will move mountains.
Can we talk a little bit about the politics up here? Because one of the things I think was so interesting about this bill is that it's not very often Congress can pass such sweeping legislation with big bipartisan margins and do it this close to an election. What were the dynamics at play here on this end of Pennsylvania Avenue that allowed this all to come together?
Well, I can speak to it on the House side.
Yeah.
So I'm the chairman of the subcommittee, and I immediately reached out to Emanuel Cleaver, who's the ranking member. He's from Kansas City. I represent Lincoln in the heartland, and he's a former mayor. And I wanted to be engaged in a lawmaking exercise. I did not want to do a messaging bill or whatever. And so we sat down, we had a prime rib together, and then we basically put out a call across the nation to stakeholders to say, send us your ideas. We got 144 ideas on paper, and we each picked 12, and we spent 15 minutes with each of them on a recess day. And what I thought was interesting is that the Blue City Democrat mayor from San Diego had the same concerns as the Red City mayor from Oklahoma City or Columbus, Ohio. The Huntsville, Alabama Habitat for Humanity folks shared the same concerns as an affordable housing developer in Florida. And really what they wanted was more flexibility with the federal funds, not so much environmental review and all of the different things that comes with it, and some flexibility just to make things work. And Democrats, I think in part thanks to Ezra Klein's abundance movement, are moving more center right when it comes to the regulations because they really value the affordable housing effort that we want to see take place.
Do you see what happened with this bill, as potentially maybe a model for how Congress might be able to work on other more complex policy issues, especially when it comes to the issue of affordability?
I think so. Like, I've only been here 4 years, and the issues only get harder every year. But what was interesting about this is that you had Republicans and Democrats in the Senate very proud of their bill, and then you had Republicans and Democrats in the House united behind our bill. That's what the founders wanted. They wanted that tension between the two chambers, not based on party, but on policy. And that doesn't happen very often around here. I mean, Maxine Waters and French Hill are strategizing on how to move Elizabeth Warren and Tim Scott. I mean, that was the amazing part for me. But, when you start out understanding it has to be a bipartisan exercise, you end up with a better result.
Let's talk about some of the policy in this bill. I mean, obviously, the underlying goal here was to make housing more accessible and more affordable. What are the key pillars of this bill that you think will make that happen for everyday Americans?
So these environmental reviews are costly, and we moved the threshold for exemption from 12 to 25, which is a big move. We got rid of the Section 3 requirements that say you have to have unskilled labor participate in the building of these, which everybody wants to see that. We're asking, basically it forces HUD to do an evaluation on the Build America, Buy America stuff. Suddenly, if you're having to get a compliance person to come in and say there's not a foreign part in the front door lock, that's a waste of time. We moved the average median income in order to qualify for the funds from 80% to 100%. We want to build homes in communities with good schools. It doesn't matter your income. You want your kids to have the best start. And then the manufactured piece, not requiring a chassis in a manufactured home.
Yeah.
The manufactured homes of today
Explain a chassis for someone who might not be familiar
so
with what that is.
it allows you to take your home down the road, right?
Okay.
So these homes are stick built in a factory and they're put on a lot and they are fixed to the foundation. There's no need for the chassis, and that saves $25,000 minimum. Sometimes it's 30% of the cost of the structure. That gets somebody into a home for less than $300,000, brand new. And what do these homes look like? They've got the island in the kitchen, they've got the mud room, they've got the big bathtub in the master bath, and those are things that everybody wants regardless of income.
Is the predominant benefit of this individual housing, or does it also apply to urban issues like more apartment complexes and other condo-style housing?
Well, traditionally the home partnership program has been used for multifamily. We made a focus on single-family homes here. We also got private equity out of the business of buying up all the homes in a city like Atlanta.
Yeah.
That was kind of controversial when it started, but we found a common ground. I think that'll be good. The other thing that nobody's really talking about is, aside from the home partnership program, you can now use your big CDBG entitlement money. A lot of cities get this.
Block granting, community development block grants, yeah.
For housing. It's now the 27th allowable use. That's a big deal. If you're the mayor of Dallas and you get, let's say, $30 million, that can now go to building homes, which means more affordability. You can put the streets, the sewer, the sidewalks in and reduce those costs for the developer and ultimately the homeowner.
How much is still protected in local communities, where I think it sounds like it makes it easier to streamline the process to get homes in there, but can local communities still have zoning rules? I'm sure even in places like Nebraska, certain communities don't want certain kinds of housing.
You are exactly right.
So does it still maintain those kind of protections for communities to decide what gets built and where?
We don't belong in zoning, but to your point, zoning is a big barrier.
Yeah.
And so communities that really are serious about affordable housing, they'll embrace strategies that promote density, ADUs, a mother-in-law house in the backyard. They'll endorse things like more multifamily in a dense area, letting kids live in homes closer to the swimming pool and the school and all those things. There's a lot of not in my backyard that's gone on in this country forever. We need yes in my backyard if we want to make this work.
Is this a 50-state problem, or are there regions that are particularly going to benefit from this legislation?
I think you're going to see communities that are really serious about affordable housing, those that have made changes to their zoning laws. That's where developers are going to build.
Yeah.
So if you have said no to this, don't be surprised when it doesn't change. If your community isn't ready to have the kind of development that is attached to these funds, they can zone it right out of there. And that's sad. I mean, that's really sad. But I do think you're starting to see more city councils and mayors across the country really embrace more density, which is what we need.
Do you have any concern that expediency could risk safety in terms of manufacturing and building? Does doing it faster potentially have any of those risks?
You know, every community has building codes and standards, and we continue to adopt sometimes even the newest regulations. I don't think that will fall victim to more resources. You know, something that nobody's really talking about, in the One Big Beautiful Bill, we greatly increased our low-income affordable housing tax credits, which is as important as what we did in the bill that passed the House last night. So when you put those two things together, there should be a lot more supply coming on the market.
What does the pace look like for this? How fast can these changes start being seen in communities?
Well, I think just on the manufactured housing side, this is a shot in the arm. This is going to make their product really viable and affordable, and it's going to put more American workers in jobs. And so, ironically, in my home state, Warren Buffett has one of the biggest companies, and I'm going to go visit one of their factories to see how this is going to change and what this will do to demand.
Do you have a sense that it's going to affect your particular district?
Oh, absolutely.
How so?
Well, so Columbus, Nebraska, 25,000 people, 800 open jobs, good jobs, and the number one challenge to filling those jobs is no housing. And so the community of Columbus has got a city administrator and a mayor and a city council that they're taking city-owned land, and they are getting a developer and they're putting up homes. And they're talking about how can we do this with manufactured homes, how can we do this with just using our home partnership dollars. Some of these funds through the home partnership will flow directly to cities like that, and they'll be able to use it for infrastructure. So I think it will make a big difference.
I want to go back to something that you said about the provisions in the soon-to-be law that affect institutional investors. This has been a big issue about housing in this country. What does it change in the system as it existed, and how will it work going forward?
So cities like Dallas, Atlanta, you know, any larger city, you've had major private equity companies come in, buy up single-family homes, and then rent them. And there's concern that...
And for more money, for above market rate, right? They get priced out.
That's absolutely the concern. And then you've got families that want to buy a single family home that there's no supply. This was really a hard bargain and driven by the president and folks in the Senate. We capped any one company at 350 total homes. We did...
Nationally or in a state? Nationally. Okay.
So I think that's effectively going to curtail that business, if you will. We did make it possible. You can still build new homes to rent, but you can't buy existing housing stock for the same purpose.
Let's say that this law works perfectly as you designed it. What does the housing market look like in 10 years?
Well, right now we have a 4 to 5 million dwelling shortage. And if we can bring that shortage down even to 2.5 million, it should bring prices down. It should increase competition. You should have more housing stock. And we should lower the age of the first-time home buyer average from 40 to what it was when I grew up. You know, when I got out of college 2 years later, I got in my first house. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. And when that became mine, that was my investment in the community and the community's investment in me. And if you're renting at 39, your connection isn't as strong to your community.
What other pieces of the puzzle are there in the housing situation in America that you think might need to be addressed, or do you think that this really gets at the key core problems?
Well, I think access to credit is important. You know, there's a lot of, especially younger folks, that don't have a FICO score because they don't use credit cards or they don't, they don't have a mortgage, obviously. I think we can now use artificial intelligence. We can use some of the programs that are out there to go into their bank account and say, wait a second. She pays her utilities on time, she pays her rent on time, she has a car payment that she pays on time, she's never late on this expense or that expense, and build a credit profile that would allow an underwriter to get her a loan. So I think underwriting is one thing that can change with more access to like credit information. I think we can take the federal home loan bank system and give them some more flexibility to use the funds that they essentially put in the market to help build affordable homes. Ultimately, I think we need loan products that You know, the 20% down is too high of a hill for a lot of people. And you know, I know some of these banks, they have actually, nobody knows about it, a 1% down plan with PMI insurance and all sorts of interesting approaches. So just making it easier for that first-time home buyer to feel like they can actually get, you know, a loan.
Do you think some of those changes are feasible in the near future? I mean, it does seem like on this issue in particular, there's a lot of goodwill right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, this is a bipartisan issue. I think some of this can be done by the FHFA. You know, Bill Pulte is currently the director of that, but we're having these conversations about access to credit, and not all of them require a legislative solution, but certainly get more people credit, give the home loan banks more authority. And one thing that I didn't get in this bill as much as I wanted was, I wanted just to do away with Build America, Buy America, BABA, because it's just too much compliance, you know. So
But
I also
say
didn't
more
get
about that, because I think that Build America, Buy America is generally so popular.
I
Like,
know,
what's the
I know,
downside
I
of
know.
it?
Well, think about all the different opponents. So you're buying windows, doors, appliances, and you're spending money on a compliance effort to make sure that you can certify that there's not a part in the refrigerator that came from wherever.
Sure.
I get it. The goal is to build an affordable home. Let's not let perfect be the enemy of good. And let's let the home builders build homes at the best price, because that's where we get the best investment.
It's a good example of well-intentioned policy,
Yes.
not always having the intended consequence.
That's
that it
very
wanted
well
to.
said. These,
Yeah.
you know, all of these things are well intended. Paying a prevailing wage, well intended, but it's the compliance that kills you. So I would think that HUD could offer more waivers, and that's what I put a bill in last week to do that.
I'm going to just switch gears a little bit because I have you, and there's been a separate debate going on about what's left to do in this Congress. What is your personal view on this idea of doing another reconciliation package? Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, I think it may be the only idea if we want to replace our munitions for our armed forces. I don't sense that the Democrats are willing to do a supplemental. If they are, that's what we should absolutely do.
That's preferred.
And if Chairman Cole says that's what we need to do, then that's where I'll be. To me, from where I sit now, it looks like reconciliation may be the only pathway there. But what needs to get done before the end of the year? Well, we got to reauthorize FISA, Section 702. We've got to pass the NDAA.
Yeah.
And the one that I'm most worried about is we have to fund the government after October 1st, 30 days
right.
before an election. And it's going to require maybe at a minimum a continuing resolution that takes 60 votes in the Senate. And it's going to be attractive for some to not want to vote for that and they create the long lines at the airport, you know, right before an election. And that's sad to play that game, but that is the game. Those are the games that are played.
The incentives, the political incentives over shutdown seem to have completely been upended in recent years.
And
because
nobody wins in a shutdown.
You're right.
You know, people always point one party after the other, and yeah, there's always one to blame sometimes, but you can't explain it on Main Street.
I'm curious about your district going into the election, because you represent, I think, one of these places in America that's a little bit, I don't want to say swingier per se, but you know, you represent a more centrist type of district. What's the vibe there? What is your mood about running for re-election? And do you think that the housing bill is going to be sort of central to your message of like, hey, this is why I
People
should be
do
there?
like the housing bill. I'm one of the few Republicans that holds town halls.
Yeah.
And so I get a real good feeling of what's out there. And there are two different sides that are polarized, but I think there's a lot of people in the middle. You know, they want to see prices come down. They want to see gas prices better. Farmers want to see better fertilizer prices. This election is going to be about the economy, and we have to do everything in our power to bring prices down. And we're going a good direction with our efforts in the Middle East. I want to see that get done. And, you know, not only will we have a good harvest this year, I want good prices.
Congressman, you've been so generous with your time. If you will indulge me, we do a little segment called 535's 1 Minutes at the end of our interviews. This is a much more lighthearted round of questioning compared to housing and defense supplementals.
I'm ready.
I'm going to ask you, what is the best food to eat in your district?
Big Fred's Pizza. Well, that's actually in Omaha. Best food to eat. Well, Runza.
Which is?
It's like a German hot pocket with like ground beef and onion and sauerkraut and stuff like that.
I have to give you credit for actually answering that question, because it is surprisingly one that politicians dodge because they don't want to have to pick one food.
No,
They're
I
like,
got
"All
it.
the foods in our
Runza.
district." Who is your favorite person on the other side of the aisle?
Oh, Emmanuel Cleaver.
Yeah.
He's a gem of a guy.
Was he a friend before this process, or was this process something that sort of brought you two together? Yeah.
Yeah. He's got a good heart. He housing is very personal to him. He grew up, without much in terms of resources, and he tells the story of how his dad was so proud to have a home that was his, and he had the best lawn in the neighborhood because it meant everything to him, and you can see that in his work in Congress.
Who do you think is one of the smartest members of Congress?
French Hill.
Why is that?
Oh, whip smart, been around a long time. I think he reads Aristotle for just like pleasure at 2 a.m. I don't know. He's super bright. I always tell people Little Rock's they're getting their money's worth. They've sent a really smart guy to Congress.
If you had unilateral power to fix one thing about this way it operates, what would it be?
About this place?
Yeah.
And remember, I came from a unicameral.
Yeah?
So I would get rid of the Senate. And I'd just have a house.
And finally, what are you going to do for the August recess?
I am going to I'm having my flyover FinTech, so I bring people to Lincoln, Nebraska to talk about FinTech. This year we're going to have the CFTC commissioner. I'm going to go to a bunch of communities, and I'm also going to be working on educating myself on reinsurance. Home insurance premiums are super high. Everything's domiciled over in Europe or the Bahamas. Sometimes I think Americans are paying the bill for New Zealand to have good property insurance premiums, so that's going to be at the end of the month.
No vacation?
I kind of took my vacation last week. I went to the College World Series in Omaha.
Oh, that's nice.
10 days straight, so
that counts.
I got it all.
Congressman Mike Flood, thank you so much for doing this. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll be with Congressman Jim McGovern.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
Congressman Moliner, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Appreciate you having me.
Can you explain to people where your district is and what kind of district it is? What do they grow in your district? And is that a big job industry in your district? Talk to me about this bill you have. It's called the Farms Act. What exactly is the problem you're trying to solve with this? Is this something that the administration could address on their own, or does it need to require Congress to pass a law to really fix it? Is this bipartisan at all? Do you have Democratic support? So what's the brass tacks here? Who's your counterpart in the Senate, and what is the path forward you see for this legislation?
Oh my gosh. Let me think about that.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
Here on Capitol Hill, the 535 are in charge, the members of Congress. But in a democracy, in the people's house, you need to be heard as well. So if you have questions or comments or ideas, submit them to us at 535.news, because here with us, the floor is yours. And welcome back to 535. I'm Scott McFarland, and we're joined by Jim McGovern, top Democrat on the House Rules Committee, representing Massachusetts, Worcester, Amherst, the most beautiful parts of Massachusetts. I want to start with data centers. Your state is not immune from the concerns about data centers. Your state is not at all immune from the concerns about data centers. What are you hearing from the constituents, and what do they expect you to be able to do about it?
Yeah, they want a moratorium on future data centers until
Full hold
until Congress, passes comprehensive legislation on AI. I support Bernie Sanders and AOC's bill on that, but people are concerned. It uses an incredible amount of electricity. There's noise associated. There's all kinds of environmental concerns. So, I mean, Congress ought to do its job and maybe, come together and try to figure out a way to how we handle AI in the future.
So much of this goes through the local governments in your district,
Right.
the ones you interface with on a daily basis, the counties, the cities, the utility boards,
Right.
the public service boards. Do they have trouble handling this? Or are they struggling with it?
They are. I mean, I have communities where data centers are scheduled to, be built, and these communities are coming to me and saying, you got to stop it. And they have lots of questions, and legitimate questions, and we ought to get those questions answered before we proceed any further. And again, on the federal level, we ought to, legislate a moratorium until we can figure out what the future of AI is.
I'm wondering if your fellow Democrats, I'm thinking of Ms. Trahan, who has been a leader in your state on AI issues, if other Democrats in the caucus say, yes, we need restrictions, but that moratorium is going too far.
Well, I mean, people have different opinions. I'm just giving you my opinion, but I give Laurie Trahan a lot of credit for trying to at least address the issue, because right now Congress is doing nothing on the issue.
I think at this point, the economic incentives in the state, the economic incentives of being a leader on data and AI is not sufficient to absorb the cost of the data center sprawl.
Yeah, no, I mean, and there's an enormous cost associated with them. I mean, the electricity bills are going to go through the roof because these centers, need a lot of electricity. So, again, voters get it. I mean, constituents get it. And they're a little frustrated that Congress is just kind of slow to, step up and do anything about it.
Speaking of money, speaking of cost, and speaking of taxpayers, it's possible the House is asked to approve tens of billions of dollars more to offset the cost of the war in Iran, either to backfill the munitions or to offset whatever's been expended so far since the end of February. Where do you think the Democratic caucus is on that type of request?
Yeah, I hope we're against it. I mean, the bottom line is this war is not paid for, not offset with anything. And what it has done is raise gas prices for people. People can't afford to fill their gas tanks. People aren't going on vacation because gas has gone up in price so much. This is an illegal war. We spent well over $100 billion on it. And for what? To try to reopen the Strait of Hormuz that was open before he even started the war? I mean, this is insane. This is a war that the president thought was going to be easy because he listened to lunatics like Pete Hegseth. But the bottom line is it turned out to be a lot more complicated. And if you talk to the experts, from previous administrations, both Democratic and Republicans, he would have realized this was a stupid thing to do. But he did it anyway, and the American people are paying an enormous cost.
There's a different point of view, as you'd imagine, from the Republican conference. There may be an argument among those who support funding that we got to get those munitions backfilled, and that may cost taxpayer money. Would that be something you think Democrats would subscribe to?
Yeah, okay, I didn't want this war to begin with. I don't want this war to continue. I don't think that we're going to solve anything by dropping more bombs on Iran or anybody else. So no, I'm not for giving them more money so they can bomb Iran in the future or any other country in the future. I don't trust this administration. I don't trust Pete Hegseth. They made the wrong decision here. It's a costly decision. We've lost American lives. We've put American service members in jeopardy. And American consumers, are paying through the nose. They're paying higher costs not only at the gas pump, but grocery prices are through the roof. Our farmers are getting screwed over because of this war. So enough. The Senate voted, like the House did, basically to say we're done. And I hope is that's the stand that Democrats take when the appropriation for more money for this war comes before us.
Just a minute left, and in our final minutes, we like to ask a parochial question of members of the 535. In Worcester and Amherst, what's the best food? Without ticking somebody off, tell me what the best food is.
Well, I mean, we have great Italian restaurants, great Middle Eastern restaurants. I like the Calabria restaurant in Millbury, which is outside of Worcester, which I think is an incredible restaurant. But we have incredible food in my district.
You have a uniquely diverse district.
We do. I mean, I have rural, suburban, and urban areas. I have every nationality in the world. Immigrants from all over the world. It's an incredible place.
Jim McGovern, Democrat from Massachusetts, ranking member of the House Rules Committee. Thanks for joining us, sir.
My pleasure.
535 continues. Our Tech and Trade Week in just a moment.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
America leads the world in medicine development.
It matters.
We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster.
5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home.
And not relying on other countries keeps us safe.
But China is racing to overtake us.
Will we let them?
Or will we choose to stay ahead?
When America leads,
America cures.
Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
We are Lions International, one association of global volunteers, one foundation for humanitarian grants, shaping the future, one act of kindness at a time. We are on a mission to improve health and well-being, to strengthen communities, to serve a world in need. We are Lions International.
To learn more, visit lionsclubs.org.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Susan Davis, and I'm joined by North Carolina Republican Congressman Greg Murphy. We were just talking about names. Who's got two very important pieces of legislation that he's working on. The first is focused on American farming and manufacturing, and another on Medicare's physician payment system. I do, of course, want to talk about those, but because we just have some news this morning, I have to ask you about it. Congress had this overwhelming victory last night with this housing legislation, incredibly popular. And the president was supposed to sign it in just a matter of minutes, really, and he said, no, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen next?
Yeah, so I mean, the SAVE Act is an important thing. You know, I've traveled around the world in a lot of different places just with my medical career, seeing how different elections occur in different countries. It is imperative that we get it right as far as making sure our elections are safe, secure, and they are who we are. You know, last administration allowed 15 to 20 million people in this country illegally. We didn't know who they are, where they're from, or what they're doing. And to make sure that Americans' votes are not diluted, we have to have a reasonable way of making sure that Americans are voting. That's what the SAVE Act does. That said, you know, I think we can also walk and chew gum at the same time. This is the president's strategy today, and we'll see how long it carries forward. We have things that are pressing for the country, really needs that things need to be done. We also need to make sure our elections are safe and secure.
How do you think the housing legislation, presuming it is ultimately signed into law, how's it going to benefit your district?
Well, I think it's very important because housing is such an issue, and it's been a long-standing. This is especially in North Carolina because, as you and I talked off air, a lot of folks are moving to North Carolina. We need to make sure that housing is available to them. Pulling back regulations, making sure that things are affordable are critical. You know, the cost of housing has just skyrocketed. And talking to our builders, they talk to 20-30% of homes is because of onerous regulations that put forth. You know, we want our houses to be safe, secure, we want them to be energy efficient, we want all these things. But the ridiculousness of adding regulation upon regulation really has made housing unaffordable.
Let's start to the legislation you're here to talk about. One is called the Buying American Cotton Act, and as I understand it, it would create a tax credit to encourage companies to use U.S.-made cotton. North Carolina, of course, is one of the country's biggest cotton producers, if not the biggest. Why is this tax credit needed right now?
Well, if you look at, and you pull back on what the president has been doing and talking about trade.
Yeah.
He's come in and seen what a horrible, horrible situation we've been, really starting in 1945, about how American trade has been and how we've been put really, truly at a disadvantage in the world. We've rebuilt the world since 1945 on the backs of the American economy. And you know, some of this had to do with tariffs, et cetera, trying to put free or fair trade back in. But we look at what's important for American farmers. We're on a much, much different scale, a global competitive scale than we ever have been before, having to compete with countries like Brazil, Egypt, across the world, which are able to do things in their agricultural world that don't comply with American standards. They don't have the labor costs that we do. They don't have the regulations that we do. And so we're trying to give the American farmer, specifically in this bill, the American cotton farmer, a leg up and say, hey, what are things that we can do with not only the raw product, but people who use the raw product in a different, as it moves down to ultimately turn into a garment. How can we help individuals buy American cotton, use American cotton in their processes by giving them a tax credit? Really wanting to try to bolster an industry within North Carolina and with the rest of the world specifically. I talk about my district always. To help those cotton farmers really be able to produce a product, have a reliable future, and being able to make sure that they can count on the markets as we move forward for their viability.
How would the tax credit work explicitly? It would be for the people that purchase the cotton.
It's a gradation
yeah.
into how much you use of American cotton and at what state, at what segment in the process that you use. If you're buying 100% American cotton in the first segment, you're able to have a huge tax deduction. As things move forward, as you use more and more, or as if you use less and less of the American product, you get less and less of a deduction.
And so, but isn't most of the cotton exported?
Well, it's kind of interesting
yeah.
because it gets exported, used, and then brought back to the United States. So there's certain mechanics within that just want to favor that we're using American cotton to bring back to the United States if we use it, even though maybe American cotton may be sent to Haiti, for example, or something, or some other country over in Southeast Asia, where it turns into a product and is brought back to the United States. Bringing back to the United States also gives a tax credit for those individuals if those products were made with American cotton.
How badly is the American cotton industry taking a hit right now, considering the
competition? All the American farmers are taking a hit right now due to many, many different factors. And with unfair trade practices with other countries, some fuel costs have gone up. They were terribly up, especially during the last administration. So we have a lot of factors that are really focused on hurting the American farmer. And anything that we can do, anything incrementally, if we're dealing with pesticides, if we're dealing with agricultural things, we had to do this with the Waters of America last time. Anything that we can do to help the American farmer on whatever segment helps solidify the fact that we need our farmers in the United States. We are the breadbasket of the world. We need to make sure that we have a viable future. This is a national security. If you pull back big enough, it's really a national security issue. We have to be able to support our farmers to feed ourselves.
This is a bit tangential to the issue, but it is interesting to me at this moment that there does seem to be a lot of consumer interest in buying products with American-made cotton. Yeah. So it does seem to maybe just sort of feed into the zeitgeist where people aren't as interested in as cheap textiles from abroad as they used to be.
And this is one, to use the phrase, not mine, but somebody else's, the American consumer has gotten drunk on cheap foreign things. And it's true, it's really true. We always want the cheapest things, but we also have to pull back and say, what's the right thing to do? What's the right thing for our kids, our grandkids, structurally for the American economy? And that's at the basic level. We're an agrarian society still. We're an agrarian economy in North Carolina. It's the #1 economy. We have to be able to put in policies that support the continuation of American agriculture.
What do you say to the free marketeers who say, look, the government just shouldn't be picking commodities to pick as winners and losers?
Well, it's not a free market because the Chinese manipulate their commodities. They manipulate their agriculture. It's not a free market. In certain segments, I would love to have that argument if everybody was on a level playing field, but we're not. We are competing against countries and other economies that supplement and subsidize their different parts of agriculture. We have to fight against countries that don't have the regulatory standards that we have. So it's, I'd love to say free market, but it's not free market when you add all those factors in.
I believe that North Carolina, not only does it grow the cotton, but I believe your state is home to some of the largest textile manufacturers.
Yeah,
so this
Glen
is
Raven
sort of
and some of the other places.
It sort of affects the economy on both ends of the cotton economy.
Yeah, it does. It does. And so it's a win-win for the farmer. It's win-win for the textiles. It's win-win, I really think, for the American people.
Let's talk about your Medicare physician bill. Now, this one's a bit complicated if you're not
familiar
familiar with physician payments, but it's called the Provider Reimbursement Stability Act. And as I understand it, it would affect the way Medicare pays doctors so they don't keep getting these uneven payments. Let's start with, why are doctors that take Medicare getting uneven payments for the services?
So I ran a surgical practice in eastern North Carolina for many years. And in fact, our payer mix was 75% Medicare, Medicaid, and no insurance. That means 75% of the patients who came to pay their bills didn't pay the cost of care. So 25% of those individuals ended up subsidizing the other 75%. Medicare, if you look at the last 20 years, if you look at the numbers, inflation adjusted, 33% cut in fees that go to physicians. Now, when I ran a practice, my costs were that I had to pay rent, I had to pay my staff, I had to pay the light bills, et cetera, et cetera. And if my income is going down and down and down, literally the day I had to resign from Congress, my younger partner said, we can't keep this going anymore. We have to go and be employed by the hospital, which is a much more costly focus center of care. And we've seen the huge consolidation of physician employment skyrocket from when I was starting out in practice 30 years ago, 20%. It's close to 70 and 80% now because private practices can't stay alive. And I firmly believe private practice is the most efficient, the most cost-effective, and honestly the most patient-centered way of delivering care. And so we saw 2/3 of the cuts actually come during the last administration. So you're running private practice out of business. And when you run physicians into these huge hospital consolidations or they're employed by private equity, the costs go up. The costs go up. And so what we're just trying to do is preserve private practice. And so trying to make sure that physicians are actually paid to keep their doors and allowed to be able to keep their doors open is important. You know, when we were doing our budgets every year, we'd sit in January and say, okay, or we'd sit in December, what cut are we going to get this year? How are we going to be able to manage this? And, you know, where I'm running around at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday looking for paper clips to try to make sure that we can pay our bills, that's ridiculous. And so what this bill and several other bills, we're just trying to provide stability to the practice. If you run any business, whether it's a medical practice or whether you're in a hardware store, you want stability. You want to be able to have predictions of what you do for the future. So what this bill is it provides some stability in the way that CMS will calculate these rates. Right now, it's a little bit wonky.
It involves budget neutrality, which is a term a lot of the viewers of 535 understand.
And it's a little bit wonky, but it allows there to be some variance in the ebb and flow. Instead of the huge skyrocket one year, or the depth with the next year, it tries to meter out and try to give some stability to what the prices would be.
Do doctors know about that unpredictability on the front end or the back end?
It's usually on the back end.
On the back end, so
that
makes it even worse.
Yeah, it makes it worse and much worse because all of a sudden we're getting a cut, and then how do we predict? And so, you know, there's so many different things that the attack on the private world of medicine, I'm just trying to stabilize it. You know, if you look at our oncologists, for example, who provide community chemotherapy, if they're not able to provide that in the community, patients will have to then drive hours or end up in a hospital, which is a much higher cost of care. So anytime you walk into a hospital, the prices go up. They're shifting costs in a different way.
It's not actually saving Medicare money.
Yeah, so we're trying to save Medicare money. And so just there can't be a variance of more than 2.5%. It's not a 7-8% cut or a little bump. We actually, for the first time in 25 years, actually a second time, we actually saw an increase, thankfully, in physician fee schedule. Again, it's not making greedy doctors. It's allowing them to have a business model that is much more, in my opinion, patient-centered.
And it increases this budget neutrality threshold, right?
Yeah.
So that it provides
we pushed it up
limits.
from, instead of just 20 million, we pushed it up to 50, 53 million, and then it's indexed at least every 5 years to the medical inflation index. Again, it's kind of wonky, but it's very, very important for the future of medicine.
But in terms of like real-world impact, it also seems it is about access to care. If you live in a place where there's no private or fewer and fewer private practice and you take Medicare, your quality of health care is
so try moving to a new town if you're 66 years old and then trying to find a primary care doctor in the private world. You can't do it because the physicians, when they take a Medicare patient, you lose money. You lose money on the cost of care. It actually costs you more to see that patient than it does to pay your rent, pay the staff, pay the light bill, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can make it up in volume, But that's not really how you want to take care of patients. You want a 5-minute slot, a 10-minute slot, especially in primary care. You want to be able to sit, manage diabetes, manage hypertension, and do those type of things. And so, again, it's working with CMS to provide some sanity and stability to the physician payment schedule.
Congressman Greg Murphy, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for
thank
coming
you
on
very much.
535.
Appreciate you having me.
We're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be right back.
You're watching 535. We'll be right back.
In Afghanistan, the IED actually penetrated the vehicle between my legs, but it was a miracle that we all survived in the vehicle.
When I began the process to separate from the military, it was during COVID. And with the issues back home, we just knew we got to come back home and take care of the family. So we had to go stay at our mom's house. And there was already 3 people living there and 5 of us, or 8 people. How many bedroom? Like a 2-bedroom. Like a 2-bedroom house. We were desperate.
So then when we transitioned to Texas, it was very much so like, what are we gonna do now?
When I came home, I needed a new roof due to a storm, and I was about to lose homeowners insurance as well. I applied for Operation Homefront Critical Financial Assistance Program. They've really been a blessing.
I'm in the Permanent Homes for Veterans program. They built a house for me, and it's amazing.
We got the call, this is your house, and the kids and I took off just to go sit in the driveway and cry. It's life-changing. It took us from a hopeless situation, and now we're homeowners. We have a savings account.
The best way to describe Operation Homefront is that it's like a family because they're always there for you.
I would say you guys are angels behind closed doors.
Operation Homefront has impacted my family in a way that's probably going to be passed down through my family's history. It's definitely going to be a story that's going to be told for generations.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
Hi. Hi. So we're now at our 3rd job together.
I love it. Wouldn't have it any other way.
You're like the house expert, so...
You're like the Congress expert. I only learn from you. And now we get to do this together.
I know. We get to do 535, which is a fantastic, creative, exciting little project.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of excited to talk to leaders in a different capacity. We always ask them about, do they have the votes? What do their members think about this and that? But what is actually the policy that matters to them personally?
Love it.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Susan Davis, and the future of work is changing. And Utah Republican Mike Kennedy has some ideas on how to fix it. Congressman, welcome to the show.
Susan, thanks for having me.
So you have a piece of legislation, I'm just going to call it the Tech Act, even though I know it has a longer acronym. The goal here is to expand opportunities for people who are kind of looking outside the traditional 4-year college path. What would the bill do?
The first thing is I spent 5 years as a bachelor's degree recipient, and then I went to medical school, I did my residency, then I went to law school. I've spent a long time in education, and I recognize what I did, and I was good at school and I liked school. It's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to go to that much school, and I respect that because we need people that are going to be HVAC technicians. We need people that'll be plumbers. So when I had access to Pell Grants as an undergraduate, I think that our technical education opportunities also ought to have opportunities to receive federal support for their pursuit of an education that allows them to go out and be welders and hands-on workers. So that's what our Tech Act does, is it's not an increasing an expenditure, it's not going to increase our debt, but it allows those people that are pursuing technical education to receive federal support through various programs that are already in place, but at this point, they can't tap into those programs. So we're excited about that opportunity.
Let's talk about some of those programs, though. Yeah. Like, what are these programs that currently exist that aren't available to these people?
The Pell Grant is a good example of that. It's only for typical academic institutions where people are going to learn about things that I value, like history and art.
You're talking to an American Studies major.
A very good example, although sometimes you think, well, what's the practical application of the things that you and I study?
I've been asking myself that for a long time.
And many of your listeners would think about that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I spend a lot of hours learning things that I just don't know what the application of that is in my current life, although I'm a big fan of education. And so the Pell Grant model is what we're talking about, where people have access to federal grants as well as loans that currently these technical individuals don't have access to. And so let them tap into that and facilitate the programs that they would have to go to would be anywhere from 150 hours to 600 hours of a technical education that would allow them to get a certificate of some sort. And then they could actually go out and work, which, no offense to a lot of college graduates, but they get out of school and they're not necessarily able to even do a particular job. They have to go into the job to learn the job, and then they can do it. So we're excited about this opportunity to promote the hands-on workers of our society who do fundamental work for all of us.
It is interesting because it does seem to sort of tap into the zeitgeist of the moment, that I think there is a lot of questioning about the worthiness of a four-year college degree, and this one of the new demographics is the working class college educated, people who went to college and ultimately can't find the career paths that they thought were going to be there.
So I am a big fan of trying to put some competition under our academic institutions, which is also a part of this, is as we see people who not only want to go into technical education, but as the academic institutions, the four-year institutions, see those individuals moving away from them and gravitating towards other programs, it's going to make them rethink whether or not some of these degrees that really lead to nowhere, as I'm sure you saw it in college and I certainly did as well. Some of the degrees, people get out and there's no better job after 4 years than they would have had getting out of high school, and that's not healthy for us. So the academic institutions, they need to be pressured to find opportunities for these individuals, all of them, to learn skills that they can actually apply in the jobs that they're pursuing.
One of the provisions of this that I thought was interesting, because not all of it applies directly to education, but one of the grant systems provides childcare for workers who need it. Why was that important?
We all know that there are a bunch of lifestyle aspects associated with us as we go to school, and so applying for some of these grants so that people can have their life functioning in the form of daycare or childcare is the sort of thing that facilitates many of these individuals being able to go to some sort of certificate degree so that they can get a better job and provide better for their families. So very supportive of those lifestyle opportunities. In my case, as I received support, I was able to not only use the ancillary money to buy books as well as pay rent, but also to buy food. And so that people need to live while they're going to school, and for some of that money to be used for these living expenses is a big part of facilitating people to go into these kind of programs.
I would also think more likely than not benefits women trying to get into the workforce, as they tend to be the predominant caregivers.
Non-traditional students generally, women specifically, that's part of the focus on this. There are many students that would be daunted by a 4-year degree when they would look to a 150 to 600 hour certificate as something that's feasible, because they have a family, or they're pursuing further education while they work part-time at another job that's less reimbursed. This is an opportunity for these people to have a chance to level up instead of staying in a similarly low-skilled job.
Can you talk about sort of where you see the gaps in the workforce? In other words, what are these vocational technical educations that are most wanted right now that might benefit from this?
And a way to identify that would be to call your local plumber when you have a plumbing problem in your house and see how long it takes them to come out to help you. Or when it comes to the HVAC as well, as the same example, is how long is it before you can get somebody out to fix. We have a home improvement project right now going on in my house, and these people, it takes weeks for them to get out because there's so much demand. And many of them are making very good money doing that work, but there's not as many of those individuals. I'll point to Homeland Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen as a good example of somebody who, from what I understand, he moved on from college so he could become a plumber and take over the family business, and he's done really well for himself, reportedly. And it's one of those examples of, we've got a lot of highly capable people who just don't want to sit there in a classroom and learn for 4 years the things that academic institutions think are important for those people to learn. And the idea that they learn many of these things and don't necessarily have functioning skills where they can actually fix something that needs to be fixed, that's a problem that we ought to address, and our Tech Act is addressing that.
I have to I think about my dad right now because I have 4 older brothers, and growing up, whenever anybody got a bad report card, he'd always say, well, the world will always need plumbers. And it was always a really good career option, is these sort of technical trades. But I guess I'm curious more philosophically, where you see the economy going, at least in the short term, in terms of the workforce, because there is so much concern, especially among college age workers, of what the job prospects are going to look like. And it does seem to suggest that human-based labor seems like one of the most reliable career paths right now.
With artificial intelligence in healthcare, which I, as a doctor, think about that a lot, is there's a lot of the day-to-day work that I am doing at this point that artificial intelligence could potentially do for me, actually facilitating my ability to see more people in a day, which I embrace that. I think it can be a good thing. But there's no, at this point, and for the foreseeable future, I don't see a robot coming in to actually help you with your plumbing needs in the house or help me in putting a new banister on our stairway, which is what we're doing right now. You need actually people to do that. And I think of the compelling need that our country has for power, and building factories, building power plants, that is not something that robots or artificial intelligence can do. It's nice that we can tap into our phone and find an infinite amount of knowledge that can answer all these questions, but at some point somebody needs to get a hammer and a nail, a welder needs to show up to the job, a plumber and an electrician need to do these things, and then the transformers and the ability that we have to put wires across our country so that the electricity can be delivered. So I'm a big fan of power development. I think power has been underdeveloped in our society for too long, and for us to build the power plants and to build the transmission lines is something that we need hands-on people, men and women, who not only know but can execute on their knowledge to translate these things. And when the hurricane comes or the bad storm comes and knocks those power lines down, who's going to go back and string those up? As a guy who lived for 2 weeks without electricity as a child, it was terrible. And we all of a sudden recognize how important these hands-on workers are when bad things happen, as far as the plumbing in the house isn't working or the electricity shuts off. So for us to enhance these people's ability to get access to that education so they can serve society in a compelling way that is not reproducible with robots and artificial intelligence, I just think it's smart for us as government to look at those opportunities for these people to fulfill a great need in our society.
I'm curious what you think more broadly about just the value of college education, because you are very highly educated, right? You have several advanced degrees. I'm a college graduate. Even if you agree with everything you're saying about the need for vocational tech, I have 2 little kids, and it's still hard for me to think, I want them to go to college. Like, there is this ingrained sense that going to college is going to benefit you long term in your life. Do you believe that's fundamentally not true anymore?
I think education and knowledge are something that we should pursue our whole lives. And whether we sit down in high school or college and have a professor teach us, or whether we go out into the field and do real work and learn through that experience, it's one of the reasons why, as a doctor, I ran for Congress. There's a whole opportunity of learning, that meeting people like you and others around that allow me the opportunity to see the world in a different way. It's been a great privilege for me. What I think your question suggests is this yes or no, do you need an education or not? And the answer is, we should have education through our whole life, but it doesn't have to necessarily be sitting in a classroom to receive the education. And that's where, over the past 80 to 100 years, and I'll be honest, I have a lot of patients that are attention deficit disorder patients, adults and children, and they struggle to sit still in a classroom. They struggle to sit for 50 to 60 to 90 minutes in a classroom in a traditional fashion, to have somebody sage on the stage sort of transmit information. And I don't know about your college experience, but I certainly know I didn't learn much in lectures. I was furiously, at my point, trying to write down notes or type in notes, and the lectures themselves didn't necessarily help me. When did I learn? It was when I went home, read the book, and studied it out for myself. So even the academic model where we sit there and listen to a person talking to us, it's a lot different to go, for me in the medical education, to go to the anatomy lab and actually touch and feel an anatomical specimen of the heart or the eye and allow me to actually see it while I've theoretically learned about it, that's when the education is transformative. It's something that really sticks for people. So I would like to see more hands-on education. I think people can learn any number of ways, and this goes to apprenticeships. For thousands of years, when you wanted to learn a certain skill, and doctoring has been an apprenticeship until the modern medical school was developed over the past 150 or plus years, is the doctor would take an apprentice under their wing and teach them over a period of time, and when they were sufficiently trained, they would go out and be a doctor. Attorneys did the same thing, and I went to both types of school. And it's fascinating to think even about law school. Is law school acknowledges that because every summer they send their law school students out to intern. They don't keep them in classes all year round like they did in medical school when I went there. And there's a practical application that you must have if you're even going to be an attorney. It's not all theoretical. You have to go out and actually take challenging questions and try to respond to those. So this technical education discussion that we're having is not just for people that work with their hands. I believe that when you're sitting down with a patient, as I did as a medical student, you have to confront the challenging questions that they ask and the fact that you have to generate answers in a real-time circumstance. Lawyers have the same thing. We need more practical education, not more theoretical education, and they go together. There's a necessary aspect to both of those. But let's spend more time and give more credence to those that do work with their hands, and let's get people out in the field actually doing the work instead of just talking about doing the work.
I also, it's somewhat related because it would affect the workforce. I do want to talk to you about your immigration bill. Courts recently told the president that his executive order to charge $100,000 for H-1B visas couldn't work. That basically if you want to change it, Congress has to pass a law. You've essentially done just that. You've put into legislative language that would codify this change that the president wants. Why do you think that fee is both necessary and the right amount?
The amount is somewhat arbitrary. It's a round number, but the point of that matter is what I've heard on the campaign trail. It's campaign year, and I heard people telling me that out-of-country workers were being brought in to work in tech industry is the specific example that I'm thinking of. For $60,000, they would hire an individual that an American graduate would make $120,000 or $150,000 at the same job. And they're laying off American citizens. This particular agency, and I was talking with an individual on the campaign trail, was telling me about a specific high-tech industry representative that was firing American workers and hiring for a significant discount rate these foreign-born individuals. And so that $100,000 is a floor. It's putting on notice various companies that if they're going to try to cut rate, hire in individuals to the detriment of American workers, they're going to have to pay a fee associated with that. And that's going to be a financial encouragement for them to look to our domestic grads. That when these individuals have put in the time at a four-year institution and maybe spent a lot of money to get that education, that they have a greater likelihood of finding a job with many times these American companies instead of foreign countries where they're going to be able to have employment. So that number is arbitrary on some level, but it's also a reflection of the current market value of some of these people as they come out of college.
But isn't this run counterintuitive? Because H-1B visas is often considered a phrase that's often used as the best of the best, and then a lot of these folks come to America and go to our university systems, and the argument is like, look, if we invest in educating people, we should try to keep them here. That doesn't seem like inherently a necessarily bad idea.
We do want to keep them here, the best and brightest. The other piece that's really interesting about academic institutions is they pay significantly higher tuition when they're coming in from out of country, which the universities love that. That's another piece associated with this. The current system as it is that actually incentivizes bringing in some of the best and the brightest to our academic institutions for education, but also we want to make sure, yes, that we keep the best and the brightest, but in that case, if they want to get an employment opportunity once they've graduated, then they can't get discounted, so they would need a green card to work. And the advantage that a company might have we'll make sure you get a green card, but you're going to work for a third or a half of what a domestic grad, so to the benefit of the company, to the detriment, once again, of domestic workers as well as that immigrant, the individual that's received the education, is we want to make sure companies are doing justice, not just to our domestic workers, but also these individuals who put in significant amounts of time, that they're going to have to pay for the visa associated with this person, to more than likely the benefit of our domestic grads who have put in significant amounts of time as well.
Why not? Some of your colleagues support just scrapping H-1B visa systems altogether. Why not go there?
I don't know that the system is so broken that we should throw it out. I recognize there are some that would suggest that that needs to happen, and it's worth considering, is the system that broken? But my objective with our policy is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I do believe that there's value to this process, but the financial incentives that a company might have to the detriment of domestic workers to hire for reduced rates these foreign-born individuals, that's something that deserves attention, and in this case, that's why we've opened the bill files to encourage companies to consider remediation of their current hiring practices.
Do you think, though, that it could have the unintended consequence of hurting maybe more mid-sized companies or businesses or smaller businesses? Because, look, $100,000 is a lot of money to me.
It is a lot of money.
But if SpaceX wants to hire 20 H-1B visas and pay that money, it's a drop in the bucket for a Fortune 50, a Fortune 100
Which is
company.
part of the debate. The bill's been open and introduced, and it's one of those, we would be happy to consider any number of people who want to put input. No policy is perfect, I certainly recognize that, and we're happy to consider opportunities to make things better, but the current prevailing rate, that number was selected because, yes, it is somewhat arbitrary, but it's also a reflection of the current market value. And frankly, if somebody could pay $150,000, a company could pay $150,000, and they only have to pay $100,000 for the visa application, that looks like something that starts to merit their consideration as a financial benefit. The other thing I'll point out too, and that's just fundamental to me, my father's an immigrant, he's a naturalized American citizen, and the first trillionaire in the history of the world is an immigrant to the United States of America as well. So big fan of these individuals having access to opportunities if they want them, but not to the detriment of our domestic workers.
I do want to ask you about one more issue, just because it's more pressing in the here and now, is FISA reauthorization. The law has lapsed, it's currently under debate. You've been a sharp critic of the FISA program.
Not a sharp critic, but I do believe that warrants are necessary.
What will it take to get your vote on this reauthorization?
So I continue to listen to those that would advocate one side or the other. Surveilling American citizens is a very offensive act, and I think that we need warrants associated with this.
Does it reassure you at all that senators like Tom Cotton, a very conservative Republican in the Senate, are saying very publicly, look, this does not allow to directly surveil Americans, there are strong prohibitions against that. Why don't you believe that?
Not that I don't believe it, it's just that if we're surveilling even one American citizen, I've understood that there's a lot of reforms that have been brought into play with this, and I appreciate those reforms, but 95% better, it still leaves us with 5% of, well, what else can we do to make this better so that our citizens have the constitutional protections from no search and seizures without a warrant. So these conversations need to continue to be had. And sharp critic is somebody who shows up routinely and grandstands.
You're a nicely worded critic, but you have made strong statements.
I actually, not only strong statements that have been posted generally, but I'm just not going to vote for that until we see the kind of reforms. So, for example, if 95% of my patients were well treated, but 5% of my patients weren't well treated, that's unacceptable to me as a doctor. 100%, within the bounds of human frailties, which I'll admit that I've got, is we need better protections for our American citizens. So I hear my conservative friends saying such things, and I'll just say, let's keep working on improving that system so that American citizens' rights are protected.
Congressman Kennedy, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks
it's been a pleasure.
For having me on. Appreciate it.
We have to take a very quick break, but we'll be right back.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
America leads the world in medicine development.
It matters.
We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster.
5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home.
And not relying on other countries keeps us safe.
But China is racing to overtake us.
Will we let them?
Or will we choose to stay ahead?
When America leads,
America cures.
Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the Bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
He is what your show is called, The Decider.
It's Washington's hottest new show, and it has the Beltway buzzing.
Americans, they know BS when they see BS.
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Brody Mullins.
Is this era ending and is a new era beginning?
And veteran strategist Lisa Camuso Miller.
Have you ever had to tell a client no?
Talk to the biggest and most influential players.
We wanted $1 million. He said done.
Rewriting the rules of influence.
Business is going to be on the ballot.
Congress needs to do their job.
They become lapdogs rather than watchdogs.
The people who never talk.
That's such a good question.
Talk to them.
It was kind of fun, actually.
It's Washington's only show by and for insiders.
Welcome to The Deciders.
Watch weekly right here on 535.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
We're live from the Capitol, and 535 starts right now.
Give me a point when you're ready. Welcome back to 535. We're here with Matt Haller, President and CEO of the International Franchise Association. Know each other forever. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Great to be here, Brody.
So let's start in the beginning. Tell us who your members are, what the International Franchise Association does, and what you're trying to promote right now.
Yeah, so the IFA has been around since 1960, and we were founded as an organization really to represent emerging way of doing business, the franchise business model. And the founders of some of these iconic brands that are still around today, Dunkin' Donuts, Howard Johnson Hotels, McDonald's, got together and realized, look, there was an association for the restaurant industry, for the hotel industry, for the retail industry, but franchising as a way of doing business, different than a corporate-run chain, needed its own representation in Washington. So they built the IFA, famously on a napkin at a room in Chicago, and over 60 years later, we're here today. We're a great growing industry. Basically, franchising helps put people into business. We like to say for yourself, but not by yourself. You can own a Dunkin' Donuts, you can't own a Starbucks, and it's two different ways of doing business.
Let's talk about that. Yeah. The key issue is the franchise model. Yeah. Tell us how the franchise model works and what regulatory issues that thing creates.
Yeah, so the franchise model works by, you have a brand and you have local ownership, and it's two independent, entities. So the brand's job is to, grow that brand, but they do that by licensing over a period of 10 years to individuals who become franchisees, and they know their local communities, they hire the workers in those communities, they're small businesses themselves. So Dunkin' Donuts versus Starbucks example, Dunkin' has 10,000 locations across the United States and around the world. Each one of those are owned by a small business person in that community. And so that creates a different type of business model structure than a chain restaurant that is all owned by one corporation, maybe publicly traded, and owned by shareholders. From a regulatory and policy perspective, the biggest issue impacting franchising has been in the labor space, and attempts to essentially collapse the relationship between brands and franchisees to become one entity. And some labor unions have pushed an expansion of what's called the joint employer rule onto our business model that essentially destroys our business model. And we've been fighting back against that over the last decade.
And the idea would be to make it easier for unions to form labor unions at local franchisees.
Yeah, I mean, some labor unions have gotten lazy, and they would much rather change the rules through their friends in previous administrations, and essentially our members have been the victims of that change. Fortunately, on the Hill, there's a lot of bipartisan support for franchising in this administration. The Trump administration has been very pro-franchising because franchising helps do two things. One, it decentralizes corporate power. There's a lot of distrust of big corporations right now in America and in this administration and amongst bipartisan members of Congress. Two, it's all about promoting local control and local ownership. And the outcomes ultimately for workers in the franchise model are actually far better than non-franchise businesses. So we've done some research that shows that wages and benefits and upward mobility are actually far outpacing non-franchise businesses in our sector. And as the Republican Party has become more populist, I think there's a certain appeal for what the franchise model uniquely does from a free market perspective, but also from an employee and upward mobility perspective.
So let's get into that topic. Yeah. I definitely want to talk about the American Franchise Act, but let's go backwards. Tell us about the bill that you had before the American Franchise Act and how do you transition to the bill now? Yeah, so for a decade, the IFA and the broader business community have been fighting, this expansion of the joint employer issue, which impacts any business-to-business relationship and creates, more complexity than we'd like. So a bill called the Save Local Business Act is something that the IFA, has supported for a long time. It would essentially codify a direct control joint employer standard for any business-to-business relationship. We still support that rule, that bill. If that bill could become law, we would love to see that bill become law. And you're making progress toward that bill, and then what happened? We have been making progress. Several Congresses, in the House at least, that bill has passed with bipartisan support. And we were excited to see that bill put forward earlier this year. Unfortunately, it was pulled back at the last minute during a vote series in January. And we've been continuing to build support for what we believe is a more narrowly tailored, more bipartisan solution that we think actually can become law. So we want to make sure that we have an outcome and not just send a message. And that's what the American Franchise Act is all about. It's a bill that's made for this political moment because we have a 3-vote majority for Republicans here in the House, a 3-vote majority for Republicans in the Senate. It's very unlikely that that other piece of legislation was going to receive 60 votes in the Senate, and I think as we've seen, it was very unlikely that bill was even going to pass the House with some of these more emboldened populist Republicans. So speaking of the populist Republicans, what we've also seen is an increasing support among Republicans for labor unions on some issues that didn't affect you, the Faster Labor Contracts Act. There was a vote 2 weeks ago, I think, in the House. 20 House Republicans switched sides, voted for this discharge petition on the Faster Labor Contracts Act. Yeah. Was that a sign to you that you needed to shift positions, or had you already seen? We had shifted positions on the joint employer issue, as recently as the election, right? And even before that, you sort of read the room and you see Sean O'Brien, famously was at the Republican National Committee convention in Milwaukee, not endorsing Donald Trump, but clearly, sending a signal that, this is a new era for at least the Teamsters, and I think representing his members. And, to his credit, you have to represent who you stand for, whether you're a trade association or a labor union. I think a lot of labor unions have become very out of touch with their constituencies, their members, on both fiscal and on other social issues. And so I think O'Brien read the room. And I think looking at the makeup of Congress after the election, we recognize, look, it was going to be a very high cliff for the Save Local Business Act to become law, right? And so we started challenging ourselves, what could a more narrowly tailored franchise-only solution to this joint employer issue look like? And that led us to the introduction of the American Franchise Act. Worked closely with Representative Kevin Hern, who was a former franchisee himself. He ran McDonald's in Oklahoma, now likely going to be the next U.S. Senator from Oklahoma. And we have a bipartisan bill in the House with 17 Democrats. I think this bill uniquely unites
Republicans on a really important, policy and divides Democrats. And I think we see a pathway in the Senate for this bill to move in the fall.
And that seems to be a switch from the prior bill. The prior bill was sort of splitting Democrats and uniting splitting Republicans and uniting unions. And this one is sort of reversed. You've got, you said 17 House
17 House Democrats.
House Democrats.
It's a bipartisan bill also in the Senate.
And more than 100 co-sponsors.
Senator Angus King and Roger Marshall are the bipartisan co-sponsors in the Senate. And I think we feel bullish about this bill moving in the fall and deliver a win, at a time where Republicans, just yesterday had a big win on a housing bill. The president's coming up here for a signing ceremony today. I mean, momentum
Newsflash, things have changed.
Momentum is real, right? And you want to continue to stack wins, particularly, it's no secret, right? Republicans are in, a tough political spot right now with the war, and other issues. But I think continue to stack wins, deliver, results to voters and things that their members can go home and talk about. While at the same time, a lot of these moderate Democrats are looking for things, that are not, the crazy things on the far left. And, franchising is uniquely bipartisan, uniquely supported. Every member of Congress knows their local franchisees in their community, their backbones of the economy. And this is an opportunity to have an up or down vote on, do we support the franchise model? And we think the answer is going to be unequivocally yes.
And let's talk about the Teamsters and labor unions. They were against the prior bill. Here you've got some labor unions, most labor unions probably against this bill, but the Teamsters are on the sideline. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think it means that the Teamsters are open-minded to to organizations that are looking to do things that are incrementally positive, and I think they see the benefits of the free market, while also as I talked about earlier, as conditions improve for franchise businesses, they stand to benefit. They support a lot of the franchise model supply chain with delivery drivers and trucks, and that's a really positive thing. And so I think that's something that we've built a relationship with them and had honest conversations about. This is what we're trying to do. Here's what you're trying to do. Are there ways to work together? And it's all about building coalitions and working within the confines of the political environment that we're currently navigating.
And what is your path to 218? What is success for this year on this bill?
I mean, success is nothing short of a signing ceremony in the Oval Office with a giant spread of America's favorite fast food and lots of other franchises in the 60% of franchising that's not the restaurant industry.
And then let's imagine that you don't reach that goal. Is it a possibility with Democrats taking over the House and maybe the Senate that something could move here? I mean, this has been in the past, I've always seen it as a Republican against Democrat issue, but the way you framed it now, there's more bipartisanship. Is there any chance that a Democratic House could move this forward?
I think there's a very real chance, but I don't want to rule out what could happen this year, because that's what our focus is right now. I mean, let's see what the election brings us, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But franchising is incredibly bipartisan. Every lawmaker, knows their franchisees in their community. They're often donors and supporters. And if you look at the FEC filings, which I know you love to do, you can see all of the different ways that campaigns have supported the franchise model, from hotels to restaurants to sign making, childcare, you name it. So we've got relationships on both sides of the aisle. They're very strong, and I wouldn't want to rule it out in a divided government next year.
You said you got a fly-in in September coming up.
We do. We'll have about 400 franchisees and franchise brands
coming in. Who's coming in, and who are you trying to meet with?
Yeah, so we're going to meet with everybody from the White House to leadership, relevant committee chairs. We'll be on both the House and the Senate side. Continue to build support for this bill. It should be an exciting time. We're going to do some fun things align with America 250. It's not just on July 4th. It's a year-long celebration, and as I talked about earlier, franchising is really built into the fabric of the American story. It's a uniquely American business model, but one that's been exported globally. And every franchise brand that opens outside the U.S. is actually a net trade benefit to the United States. And The Economist just did a really interesting piece, and the headline was "Why the World Needs More Franchises." So that's a message we certainly have always believed at the IFA, but we're going to continue to take to members of Congress on both sides of the aisle.
Great. You had, speaking of America's 250, you had an op-ed in the Washington Examiner. Tell us about that. What was your message?
Yeah, I mean, the message in this piece that ran today is really that franchising is having a bit of a moment. We are outpacing growth of the overall U.S. economy, not just this year, but over the last decade, since 2016, franchise growth is over 13% in terms of jobs, compared to 8% in non-franchise businesses. And also, of course, making the punchline that Congress has a uniquely important opportunity this year to deliver that certainty that our business model needs if we want to continue to propel that growth well into the future. We dropped in a couple of references from certain brands that I think are having their own moment right now. Pizza Hut is bringing back some of its nostalgia with those classic and iconic lighting fixtures and the red roofs with the red and white checkered tablecloth. Magnolia Bakery, different type of brand, but has been around for 20 years, famous from Sex and the City fame, and now is franchising for the first time. They just opened their first franchise location in Salt Lake City in Utah. And so, highlighting a few of those examples that are happening in the real economy, but also that, this is a real important opportunity to take advantage of what can protect this business model for generations to come.
Great. 535 is now running op-ed, so if you got another one, let me know about it. We'll put it online.
We will definitely do that.
Let's wrap with your new poll. You had a poll coming out this afternoon from Morning Consult. What were the findings?
Yeah, so Morning Consult surveyed thousands of Americans across the country and over-indexed in a few states, really to ask for their perception of the franchise model and their support for the franchise model. 75% of Americans support franchising, and more than 6 in 10 Americans want to see the American Franchise Act become law. I think, interestingly, more than 7 in 10 Americans also believe that growth through the franchise model is better than growth through corporate chain growth that's non-franchised, and I think that speaks to the support of small business in the country. Small business and local businesses are the most trusted institutions in America, according to Gallup and Pew and any other statistic. And we've intentionally leaned into that message and wanted to do this poll to really prove and obviously carry that message to lawmakers as well, that this is something your constituents support and you should get behind. It's a safe political place to land at a time where increasingly we're 5 months out from the election. Everybody's focused on what can I go talk to my voters back home about.
And almost 9 million jobs around the country.
9 million jobs, 850,000 franchise businesses. We're 3.5% of GDP. We're bigger than the financial services industry and the economic footprint. So it's a collection of industries. We're really a business model that's used by 300 different industries, from restaurants and hotels, but also things like pet care and tax preparation services and sign making. So it's an exciting part of the economy. Everybody that I talk to wants to ask me, Matt, what's your favorite franchise? What's the fastest growing franchise? This year,
do you have an answer? Can you answer that?
Well, I don't like to pick favorites amongst my member companies, but pet care and child care are actually two of the fastest growing sectors. Really, child care has become a broader category called youth enrichment. So everything from swim schools to music studios, and then your traditional tutoring and child care services.
Great. Matt Haller, President and CEO of the International Franchise Association. Thanks for joining us. Come back in September. We'll have you on. Brody Mullins with 535. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Thanks, Brody.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
Congresswoman, we only have a couple minutes,
Okay.
which is perfect for our 5:35 1 minute.
Should I be afraid?
Who's the smartest member of Congress?
So I'm really putting you on the spot here.
You know, don't tell anybody this.
I'm too much of a politician to answer that question.
This is crazy.
What's the best committee? I do like them all.
On you, baby.
That was good. That was good.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Susan Davis, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Scott McFarlane. How are you doing?
This has been a day.
This has been a day.
It's
I was
only
gonna
lunch,
say.
and we're already out of control.
In 24 hours, Congress passing big, major legislation, and once again, the president kind of pulling the rug out from underneath him.
Here's what's different. I mean, there's a different composition to the coalition behind this legislation.
Yeah.
It ranges from Senate Democrats like Elizabeth Warren to Republicans from whom we heard earlier in the program like Mike Flood of Nebraska. There was a signing ceremony I had gotten a seat for already, got comfortable in the chair.
Chairs were set up.
And they literally pulled the presidential seal off the podium, off the desk, moved the chairs away, moved the tables away, and escorted us all out. Haven't seen that before, been here 25 years. But it's not so much the ceremony and the timing. This bill is something people wanted to go home and campaign on.
Absolutely.
And I mean Democrats and Republicans. And that's been disrupted and it's been thrown off kilter. And one thing that caught my eye, Sue, and you'll appreciate this, while we were seated waiting for the ceremony to begin, the moment it was called off, there were at least 2 members of the Democratic caucus who hustled over to shoot social videos of the teardown of the desk and the table and the chairs, an indication of where some of our campaign and politics are in 2026.
Well, also to be clear, and I talked to Congressman Mike Flood about this. He was one of the sponsors of this legislation and one of the guests on early this morning, and he said, like, look, this isn't ultimately about the housing legislation. The White House supports the housing bill. He believes the president will fundamentally sign it at some point in the future. But the president is making almost an impossible ask here. I cannot see any pathway for his Save America Act to be signed into law before this election. It just can't happen.
That leverage is not going to work, in part because, Sue, it's going to make people dig in deeper in their opposition to the SAVE Act. They don't want to look like they've been forced to pass it. But what's more, the president himself said in his social media post canceling the ceremony that the housing bill is not a big deal. And that's a problem. That's going to be an albatross hanging around the neck of a law both parties support, even when it is signed. So it diminishes its power and its potency on the campaign trail. And nobody was at the understanding, including Congressman Flood in his conversation with you, that this is going to have an instant effect on housing prices, but it was going to be an instant tool to bring home the constituents.
I'm going to trip you up here because you might not know the answer to this question, but I'm thinking about it. Congress has passed this legislation. It was supposed to be signed today. Are we going to run into potentially some procedural hijinks here? Like the president there's laws around when the president has to sign a bill. I think there was questions of like, would he veto it and get overridden? Like, does it add this extra drama of like, what happens to this legislation if it's just sitting on his desk?
It is a tool that can be used for a leverage for a while. There's a 10-day clock that starts. Some of this moves past the president if it's not signed. But it's not the first piece of leverage he has tried to grasp in the last 7 days. He obviously pulled back a week ago today the confirmation hearings for Jay Clayton, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, to be the Director of National Intelligence. Pulled that back and instead reinstalled Bill Pulte, a controversial choice, to be Director of National Intelligence as a piece of leverage he wants to wield over the next few weeks and months to get what he wants. And now he's got 2 things. He's got a housing bill in one hand, he's got a Director of National Intelligence in the other, but neither of those 2 things, even combined, seems like it's going to move the Senate towards his end goal, which is blowing up the filibuster and/or passing the SAVE Act. There's no movement visible to any of us on those 2 things.
It does seem that the unique frustration here is towards the Senate, which is like every president ever has had that frustration. But the contours haven't changed. John Thune, there's no indication to think that he would blow up the filibuster. It does seem like the relationship between the majority leader and the president is getting a little tense, much as it did with Mitch McConnell before him. To me, it's somewhat surprising that the president hasn't learned to accept the reality of the Senate, or maybe he thinks he can ultimately get them to change the rules.
The Senate as a source of frustration is a bit of a redundancy, right? I mean, it's always going to be a president's frustration, it's always going to be a House member's frustration. Even the senators get ticked off at their own institution. What I noted over the last 3 weeks is a change in some of the posture of some of those Senate Republicans, and it's not in the right direction for President Trump. If you recall back eons ago, 2 weeks ago, when the Senate passed that second reconciliation bill, the one that funded Customs and Border Protection and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, there were those overnight votes on amendments about the slush fund. Remember way back when in our history books a couple weeks ago? And he saw defections. Trump saw defections from Republicans who don't normally defect on some of those amendment votes on the slush fund. Republican senator from Florida, Republican senator from Ohio, Republican senator from Alaska. They didn't go along with Trump's desires on those amendments. Those seem mushier now. All three of them are in cycle, all three of them potentially facing competitive re-election races. And if he wants them to move on the filibuster or the SAVE Act, seems to be the worst possible timing because he's seeing defections on other things.
Also, to me, I think it's interesting about the Save America Act because I think in the substantive policy of it, obviously a lot of Republicans support it. But on the politics of it, you even get the sense that a lot of Republicans don't think now is the time. In that, trying to force legislation through that could affect this election, so close to the election, really does seem to run a risk of political backlash, even from people that might be inclined to support Republicans otherwise.
I think that's a perfect diagnosis of it, Sue. You have people who very much, if not overwhelmingly, support voter ID laws, and that actually is a broader coalition than some people here in this building think. But the other components of it have the risk of making you look like you're changing the rules of the game after you put the pieces and the players on the board. I mean, we're post-primary in many states. We're in general election mode. To change voting rules now has the risk of being perceived as politically heavy-handed, and members of Congress, members of the Senate want nothing to do with that right now. Yeah,
I also think too, I believe it was in the last election, time is always a flat circle, but there was this effort in Ohio to change the rules of the Constitution regarding abortion legislation, and it failed overwhelmingly in a red state, and it wasn't because they didn't support the underlying legislation. American voters don't necessarily just like changing the rules of the game in the middle of the game. I think that is still something that voters largely have a consensus on. So
time is was that last year or 8 years ago?
I don't know.
It was a 60-40 vote in Ohio. It was an overwhelming vote against changing the abortion
and it happened
laws.
In August. They thought it would be low turnout. I mean, I think there is the sense if people feel like you're messing with them, that it has...
You're being gamed.
Yes, you're being gamed, that has the opposite effect. I am curious, I talked to Congressman Mike Kennedy from Utah, who doesn't seem altogether that concerned yet about FISA lapsing. Where do you get the sense of the state of play of that? And is urgency increasing, or do you feel like this could ride for a while?
There seems to be an understanding, implicit if not declarative, that somehow the administration have levers to pull or push even during this expiration, perhaps all the way to 2027.
Wow.
I sense no urgency. I sense no fear. I do sense people wanting to use this as a political argument that, hey, we're making things less safe if we're making it less clear what powers the president can use for foreign intelligence. But I don't sense any fear about the posture of the U.S. right now because the FISA has expired. But spoken a lot over the last week with Mark Warner, top Democrat Senate Intelligence Committee. It's quite clear to me his top priority is getting Bill Pulte out before extending FISA.
That is so interesting to me in the cultural shift around FISA, especially coming out of the 9/11 era. There's this sense that it could just fundamentally never lapse, that it was so critical to American national security. And it does feel like the feeling up here has changed about that. And to me, I'd say partly why it's so interesting, heading into a couple in the middle of high-profile events. We're in the middle of the World Cup. I know Shelley Moore Capito is a senator who's raised this. I also know America 250, events all over the country, the kind of events that 10, 15 years ago it would have been unfathomable to consider politically letting FISA lapse.
And I think what's important to the 535 is that no matter how many levers the administration has to push in the absence of those foreign intelligence powers, it's quite clear Congress is being circumvented again. Where if we're going to say the executive branch has all that it needs, we don't need to weigh in as an Article I branch of government, That's a surrendering of power, which I think really has defined the last 16 months of this Congress, including in this session.
Back to the housing legislation, just on the politics of it. It does seem, despite the drama of the day, a pretty significant victory across the board, where members, the frustration is nothing gets done up here. They're not solving any problems. RD, rural, urban, this is a pretty potent thing to campaign on.
There's a shortage of housing in rural areas. There's a shortage of affordable housing in metropolitan areas. It is a suburban and exurban. It's a universal thing, which is why the patchwork that supported this bill was always so interesting to us, and why we dug into it on 535 is because it brought people together who otherwise would not be together on things. There seems to be an understanding as the afternoon begins here, this thing's going to become law, and they'll be able to bring it home and sell it to their constituents as best as they'd like to, and potentially fix some of the problems of Wall Street giants gobbling up housing stock, or regulations that onerously prevent the building of housing. But the president said, in so many words, it's not a big deal. They've got to now surmount that hurdle as they make their argument. It just makes things more difficult.
I also just want to note, one of the things that I like about 535 and doing these interviews is I often learn new things. And I want to give a credit to Greg Murphy, he's a Republican from North Carolina. And just the things you didn't know that you now know is he has legislation regarding how Medicare reimburses physicians. This is the exact kind of thing that's super wonky.
He's a doctor.
He's a doctor, but talking about budget neutrality formulas and all this. But the bottom line of it is that the real world impact of this is that physicians can't depend on Medicare payments. They're very uneven year over year. But he came from private practice, and he said the impact is it is affecting private practices. And private practices all over the country cannot sustain it, so they're closing and shifting this care towards hospital systems. And I would not have, I understand why that's an issue, and I can see why it is sometimes small fixes in government can have tremendous impacts
and
on
they're easy to explain to constituents, simple to explain. Let's look at the hospital issue. Part of what he's arguing that I hear from both parties is if we're going to shift burdens, costs, services to hospitals, let's be mindful of the situation here where we have a shortage of rural hospitals that's growing more acute, and we have the closure of inner city and metropolitan clinics. You talked to Shamari Figures, Democrat from Alabama, who said the shortage of rural hospitals has got to be his primary issue because it's what's driving his constituents. Sydney Kamlinger-Dove in Los Angeles says the closure of more than 50 clinics now her primary issue for her. These are symmetrical issues, and that's where Dr. Murphy's going with this. Is we're going to shift burdens to the hospital system. Let's be aware, the hospital system is not as strong as some people may think it is.
It's also more expensive, so it doesn't actually even save Medicare money.
It doesn't save money.
He also made the point too, and I thought this was interesting, is it also means that a lot of physicians just don't want to take Medicare or take on new patients, so then it also has this compounding issue of access to care for a very critical part of the population. What else is in your notebook?
Okay, well, let's start with what's not happening. We were to have rules votes at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time here on Capitol Hill, setting up the next slate of bills. Looks like those are off the table because of whatever reverberations or seismic impact there was from the cancellation of the signing ceremony on the housing legislation at noon. They'll hash all that out, but for now, that seems like it's gummed up action in the U.S. House. As for the Senate, they're still trying to make their way through any number of hurdles, but I'll tell you, at some point soon, could be as early as this week, they're going to have to ask formally for Congress to approve $80 billion to backfill costs from the Iran war and the peace process so far. And I'm not sure where the constituency is for $80 billion, even if it means restoring munitions that have been depleted by Iran, even if it means backfilling equipment the military needs and that local constituents can build to drive the local economy. I don't know where those votes are. And they're going to have to get after that in an aggressive way. And I'd like to think that was a component of what Senate leadership hoped the president would do today, meeting with Senate leaders, is reinforce we need money for Iran, even though we're in the middle of a peace negotiation.
I understand politically why that vote would be unpopular on the Iran front, but it also seems like the idea that this is re-stockpiling American munitions, which is ultimately what the money is for, seems like it could have its own political tenuousness, that this idea that the U.S. military is unprepared might also not be something that members want to have to explain.
That's why it's interesting and also tricky, Sue. We're also in the arsenal of democracy here, where we have many communities in swing states like Michigan, Virginia, where they build these things. So funding for munitions and other costs of the war in Iran is a local economic driver at an important time. But I don't see the Democrats coming out to say, hey, I'll be on board for this, it's important. Don Bacon, retiring Republican from Omaha, told me, yes, we have to pay for this. We can't just assume these problems and these bills go away. Let's see how broad a constituency they can build over the coming week. It's a really important issue. That's why it's something we're tracking.
All right, you have to go do more reporting, so we are going to take a very quick break, and we will be right back.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
America leads the world in medicine development.
It matters.
We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster.
5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home.
And not relying on other countries keeps us safe.
But China is racing to overtake us.
Will we let them?
Or will we choose to stay ahead?
When America leads,
America cures.
Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
Here on Capitol Hill, the 535 are in charge, the members of Congress. But in a democracy, in the people's house, you need to be heard as well. So if you have questions or comments or ideas, submit them to us at 535.news, because here with us, the floor is yours.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
You're watching 535?
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
We're live from the Capitol, and 535 starts right now.
Welcome back to 535 News. I'm Leanne Caldwell with Puck News. Right now I am joined by Senator Angela Alsobrooks of Maryland, Democrat, newly elected, well, a year and a half in.
Yes.
We're going to talk a lot about crypto, the economy, and all the things that she's been up to since she's been in office for the past year and a half.
Yeah.
How are you liking it?
You know what? I love it. I really do. I have enjoyed the feeling that I'm in the right place at the right time. These are times that are very complex and very complicated, and I'm just really grateful to be at the table making decisions for people I care about in Maryland and across the country. So it's been a good time. You know, I've made a lot of good relationships both in our caucus and some across the aisle, and I see this as kind of this is a long road. We have a long ways to go and a lot of complex issues, but I have enjoyed the time so far.
So many freshman senators say that they have been given advice from older senators who say, or I shouldn't say older, I should say more experienced senators, to say find an issue or two that really speaks to you, that you really want to dive into, because it's impossible to know about everything.
Yes.
So I've seen, watching your career over the past year and a half, it seems like I know what those issues are, but I want to hear from you. What are the things that have spoken to you that you really want to become an expert in and you have really thrown yourself into?
Well, you mentioned, me coming from, as a part of the freshman class, I'm the only member of my freshman class as a Democrat who didn't come from the House. So I have an executive background. I came from the county executive's office and as a prosecutor, which has helped me to understand, I believe, what people care about all across my state, no matter whether it was Mountain, Maryland, or somewhere in between, Prince George's, Montgomery. People care about economic opportunity. What they want, and that's of every age,
is to have the opportunity to afford health care, to afford groceries, to be able to buy a home, to be able to generate wealth. You know, it's an issue I think people don't talk often enough about. People don't want to live on the margins. They want wealth, generational wealth, growing wealth. And so this is something that I have really had a chance to focus on the banking committee, is I think the real issue for our country is that people want to feel that they're going to be able to do better than the generation before them, and that's what I am focused on.
So one of those affordability issues could be housing.
Yes. It's absolutely housing.
The president was supposed to sign the bipartisan housing bill that passed both chambers. He was supposed to do that actually right around now. He canceled. What is your reaction to that? He canceled because he is pushing separate legislation, the Save America Act. You know, what's your response to that?
Well, you know what, he told us in plain words when he was questioned about what he thought about Americans' financial situation. And he said, quote, "I don't think about their financial situation." And I think he has demonstrated that in every way that he could. Is his, not only in my mind, there is some disdain that he has for working class Americans. And it seems to me that the actions he has taken, including this act of canceling a signing for legislation that took 30 plus years to get to, at a time when we know that the average age of a first-time home buyer is 40 years old. This is the time that he decides to cancel bipartisan legislation voted on at a margin of 85-5. He decides that this is something that he would not do. And this is added to what he's done with the Iran war, the cost of which has been borne by working class families, the cost of gas, the cost of utilities, the cost of housing. He cares nothing whatsoever, I am convinced about it, about the average working class and hardworking family in our country.
I want to go to crypto legislation.
Yes.
You were instrumental in the passage of the Genius Act. You helped to work on that, and also the Clarity Act, which is stalled in the Senate right now, the market structure bill. Where does that stand?
Well, let me tell you first of all how I came to even be interested in leading this legislation, starting with Genius. I have a 21-year-old daughter. Before I came to the Senate, I wasn't discussing stable coins or digital assets, but you know what? That generation is laser focused on the fact that we are headlong into a digital revolution. And they want us to engage in a way that makes it safe for them to participate. And so, as you mentioned, I was the first Democrat on the banking committee to lead sponsor the Genius Act. We're now headlong in the middle of Clarity. And this is really important. What I want for us is to make sure that innovation continues to grow in our country, but in a way that is responsible. I think the United States has a responsibility to make sure that we have the guardrails and the regulations. It's already happening. This is not whether or not this is going to happen. 70 million Americans already own cryptocurrency, but they're afraid of being scammed. They're afraid of having fraud occur. And so it is my responsibility not to stop innovation from growing, but to sit at the table, as I have done, to ensure that, for example, community banks, that they don't have deposit flight, that we are not allowing the crypto companies to offer bank-like products without bank-like protections, to pretend to be bank-like products, to make sure the consumer protection is a part of what we're doing. And so this has been my engagement in Clarity, is making sure that those regulations we have in place.
Is this legislation, is it possible that it can get over the finish line before this Congress ends? The issues seem to be ethics, conflicts of interest, especially when it comes to the executive branch and the president.
Yes.
We know that his family has profited greatly with on crypto. And illicit finance.
Yes.
So where do those two issues stand on this legislation?
Well, let me be very clear. You know, I voted in committee for us to continue negotiating. I thought we had very good bipartisan conversations. I will not support legislation on the floor that does not address ethics and does not address illicit finance. The ball is in the court for the Republicans, however, on this. We have really negotiated, worked really hard with them to have the kind of language that we thought would, on ethics, address not only the president and vice president, but all of us in elective office. I think we should all be held to a certain standard, and to make sure that we have a bill that has ethics language. In illicit finance, I'm a former prosecutor. So I am not going to support anything that really lowers the standard and disallows our law enforcement community from protecting constituents and protecting the American public. And we've been very clear. So I think it's possible, to answer your question. Absolutely, I think we can get it done. I think everyone understands what needs to happen. We have to have language on ethics. We have to have language on illicit finance, which, by the way, is good for everyone involved. Good for the banks, good for the crypto companies, and good for the American people. I think we can do it.
What's the hold up on the illicit finance at this point? I know there was a lot of former national security officials who signed a letter pushing the Senate to move forward on where it stands now, but you also have the Fraternal Order of Police and other law enforcement on the other side saying that it's not where it needs to be.
Well, I think part of the challenge is this: having DOJ have the responsibility for prosecuting cases, and if they refuse to, then allowing state attorney generals to sue the Justice Department. That has been part of the language that was required. We were getting close, and so I think we have to have everybody at the table to make sure that this very common sense sort of language is considered and included. But again, we were very close. I think we can get it done, but law enforcement is important, and I've heard loud and clear from them that they have grave concerns, and I want to make sure that we're able to prosecute people who do bad things. I mean, I think this is a simple concept.
Yeah. On the ethics component, Republicans will say that that there is a constitutional protection of the president, and that is why that you can't legislate any sort of ethics code when it comes to the executive branch, to the president. What is your response to that?
Oh, come on. You know what? I mean, we were just this close. The White House suggested language. The Republicans suggested language that did include the president, included the vice president, and included all elected officials. And so the idea that we can't get there is just not true. And I think they know it's not true. And again, it's going to be especially important that we have this kind of language that covers all of us in order for it to move forward.
How important is crypto in an emerging economy to help people who aren't necessarily connected to the traditional economy, to the banking system? Is there an element of that, of why crypto is necessary for people to help create wealth?
Oh my goodness, you know what, it makes payments faster and cheaper. You know, I talked to a business owner, for example, who worked at a KFC when he was 16 years old. He now owns 32 KFC restaurants, but still operates with a really narrow margin of about 3% profit margin. He said just being able to use cryptocurrency to accept payments adds about a percentage point back and allows him to invest in his workers, allows him to invest.
He doesn't have to pay credit card fees,
right, he doesn't have to pay credit card fees. And so some of our small businesses find that these cryptocurrency payments make it much easier for them to do business and more cheaply. And again, this owner said, I just want to be able to give back to my employees. I want to be able to make some investments in my restaurant that make the customers more comfortable. We're using digital assets, not cryptocurrency, but we're using even the blockchain in Baltimore to track vacant housing. And so this—
How does that work?
You know what? The technology allows them to be able to monitor it and to survey vacant homes in because we're trying to repair this issue, and they're able to use somehow the blockchain to monitor it and to keep track of it.
Is it risky though? Is our digital assets as crypto, is this risky?
Well, that's why it has to be regulated. I think everything is risky if you don't regulate it. But this is the thing. It's already happening. That's what everyone needs to understand. What we have now is not acceptable. We have 70 million people who already have cryptocurrency in our country. What we're trying to do is to make sure we regulate an area that is already happening to protect people. It is so irresponsible for us to fail to set up guardrails and to regulate an area that, again, leaves people exposed to scams, leaves them exposed to other risks. That's what we're trying to mitigate. And again, I think there's a way for the United States to do it so that we're innovating, and we're doing so in a way that the whole world gets to see how this should really be done. Show them how to responsibly do it. But it's already happening. It's totally delusional to pretend that this is not already happening. It is. We got to regulate it.
What is if Democrats take control of Congress after the midterm elections, do you, and let's say clarity doesn't pass before then, would it look much different, do you think? Do you think that the legislation would look different if Democrats, were the leading party on it?
I think it's important to get it done now. And I think it's important to get it done because, again, it's happening.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And I think ethics, I think illicit finance, I think making sure the consumer protections are there, all of it, making sure we're protecting small and community banks, making sure we're not treating these like bank-like products without protections. These are all the things that are still important now and will be important later.
I was listening to an interview you did with CNBC recently, and a lot of things you said were great, but one thing that actually stood out to me is you said affordability issues need to be able to address people like your parents who were 21 and 22 when they got married, a car salesman and a receptionist, which is like hilarious because that was exactly my parents.
Was it? Wow.
Got married at 21, 22. My dad was a car salesman his whole life. My mom was a secretary.
Oh my goodness.
And so, and you talked about it from the housing perspective and the importance of being able to afford a home. Does this, getting back to the housing issue, does this legislation, you think, will it be enough to break that barrier for people to be able to buy starter homes or to access affordable housing?
I think you absolutely will. And as you mentioned, I grew up in a working class family. My parents, who married at 21 and 22, could actually afford to buy a modest home within 5 years.
Yeah.
Again, that is no longer the case. This legislation now allows banks, for example, to have the ability to invest in affordable housing. It allows as well for people who are of modest income to have an opportunity to get some grant funding to make repairs to their homes so they don't lose these homes. It allows appraisal bias to be addressed. And in general, what I believe now, and you've probably heard me say this before, is that all of these issues around affordability, about working people are issues that ought to be germane to us. And one of the observations I've had is we all say we love poor people, but we apparently don't know very many of them. Because if we did, we'd make sure we're investing in things like housing that allows people to develop generational wealth, cryptocurrency, digital assets. These are areas that I believe will allow people who have been locked out of financial opportunity to finally have their shot at it. It's why we have to make it safe and regulated for them to participate, but we have to open up more markets for people to become wealthy. Again, people are tired of us offering them the chance to barely make it. What they want instead is to be wealthy. It is not a dirty word. I just want more people to have access to it, to be able to truly grow their businesses, to find the ways that they can to get trained and have opportunities as these new innovations come about. It's what we are called to do, is to make sure that people, again, are thriving, not to just barely getting by. That's what I want us to understand.
When you talk about new innovative technologies, is of course artificial intelligence. Where do you stand on some fellow Democrats who believe different versions of the same thing? Bernie Sanders is talking about, a fund created from the AI companies, especially to help compensate people, to help people. Do you think that is important when the future of AI and how it impacts the economy is so unknown? That these very wealthy companies should have a stake in making sure that.
Well, you know what? I think that the general sentiment is this: is the average person, working class people, should not bear the brunt of increased utility costs and other things. I think that's what we're talking about, is making sure that we do not overburden as these technologies continue to emerge, making sure that the responsibility for paying for increased utilities and everything rests where it belongs, and it's not with the people. So I do agree with that, is that we have to find a way, again, to make sure that we allow for innovation to continue to grow, but that is not overburdensome to working class families. I think that's what we're seeing in all of the pushback, is making sure that, when we think about AI, the question is not just how to use it, the question is who benefits from it and who doesn't. And we want to make sure that as it grows, that the people benefit, that we are finding ways to amplify their businesses and give them ways to grow it, that we are finding ways to create new opportunities in the workplace and workforce, that we're not displacing jobs, and that, again, they're not paying the cost of it in their utility rates. And I think that's what people want. The rest of it is for us to figure out, is how to do both, to have innovation grow without burdening people.
Senator Alsobrooks, your team agreed to 5:35, 1 minute. I don't know if you know what this is.
I think I got a little idea about it.
But great. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, fun questions, to get to know, so people can get to know you a little bit. You do not have a very long commute to work every day, and unlike some of your colleagues from Alaska or California. But what do you do on your commute?
Well, you know what? First of all, I absolutely love music. And so I always listen to music on my way in. And you know what else I listen to be honest? This is going to tell my age. I listen to the Steve Harvey Morning Show.
Really?
Yes, I love the Steve Harvey Morning Show. So I enjoy listening to them. He gives a motivational moment at the beginning of it each day, and sometimes by the time I get here, the motivational moment is coming up again. So I listen to that, and mostly I prepare. You know, I have a book that's sent home with me each day, and so I'm kind of looking over what happens for the day. But this is the one thing. I'm always happy to come here, and I feel so grateful for that. I am happy when I come to work each day. I really have enjoyed, I love coming here.
So, kind of full circle, when I asked you how you're liking your job at the top of the interview, you said that you've made friends or had good relationships with people across the aisle. So who is someone on the other side of the aisle that you enjoy talking to, working with, and or spending time with?
You know what? I really like Cynthia Lummis. Yep, of Wyoming. I find her to be, first of all, very kind. She's smart. We're working on legislation to fund fibroids research for women. And she didn't hesitate to step up and work with me on this bipartisan issue. But I just like her. You know, I just find her to be so cool and fun. I really liked Tom Tillis as well of North Carolina. I went to college in North Carolina, so we got all kind of.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Duke University.
Okay, I went to NC State.
Oh my goodness. Yes, it was North Carolina, by the way, we can agree, is a great place to go to college.
I love North Carolina.
Yeah,
it's great.
I've made friends at all of the schools in that area. It's a great place to go to college. But those are a couple of my favorites that I've met.
Fantastic. Senator Angela Alsobrooks, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And tomorrow, I'll be back. I'll be interviewing Senator Mark Kelly, who is switching his focus from deep space to the deep blue sea. He's teaming up with Congressman John Garamendi to talk about getting U.S. ships out on the oceans. But on behalf of all of us here at 535, thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow.